up on science. She works with physics, she works with neuroscience, she works from engineering as well. So she's going to tell you all about what she's found out about the brain. Dr. Vini Gautam. Keep clapping. Hooray! Woo! Other way. That way. Yep. That's the point of that edge.
Hello, good evening. I'm based at the Australian National University. I'm a research fellow there, and I'm also a representative of the Australian Society for Medical Research. So I would like to thank them to have me here, and also Phil to have me here. So to tell you something about the brain, as you all know, our brain is one of the most complex organs in the body. It does pretty much everything that we do. It's responsible for doing that we do every day. So make it how we see, how we move, how we talk, or how we make decisions. It controls pretty much everything. So imagine it to be like a supercomputer, which is really, really smart and powerful. And how this supercomputer basically works is with the help of cells called neurons. And it is these cells which control the functioning of the brain. Now, if it's a supercomputer, it has to have circuits. So these neurons are connected with each other like circuits, and these circuits are called neural networks. So the things coming out of the neurons are like wires, and these neurons connect with each other using these wires and form neural circuits or neural networks. Now, in real life, neurons are three-dimensional in nature. So showing you some of the real pictures from the laboratory, how do neurons look like in the brain? And these are how neural networks look like in the brain. And they are three-dimensional in nature, so they're not flat as they look in the first image, but they're more 3D. So they're real cells working inside your brains. And to tell you the truth, we have about 100 billion neurons sitting inside the brain and doing all the functioning and making all the decisions. Thanks. Now, what happens when a brain gets damaged due to a disease or a stroke or a trauma? It is these circuits which break apart. And unlike other cells in the body, neurons cannot regenerate by themselves. They cannot form these circuits by themselves. They need help, right? Now, So how can we help the neurons to form these circuits back again and repair all that damage? So what we can do is we can use the knowledge from neuroscience so we can understand how do circuits form in the brain when they form while we are growing up. How do they form? How do they function? Once we know that knowledge, what we can do is mimic it artificially and then create the solutions. We create the treatments of those we create the treatments of the diseases which occur after the brain has got damaged, right? Now, in neuroscience, we don't fully understand how brain circuits form, so that is the challenge. And that is the reason why we don't have any drugs to repair the damage to the brain, because we don't fully understand how our brain circuits form and function. So my idea is to use technology, is to use principles in engineering and technology to understand how brain works, how circuits form, and then to mimic them artificially and help the neurons to form these circuits again. And in future, we can help the treatment of the brain, treatment of the disabilities by repairing the circuits which are broken up in the brain. Now, how am I approaching this? I'm approaching this by growing neurons from brain on what I call a nanoscaffold. So that is the technology that I'm developing. What's special about the technology? Nano is dwarf. It's 10 to the power of minus 9. So to give you a perspective, a DNA strand is about 2 nanometers in diameter, and our hair is about 100,000 nanometers in diameter. So a nano is really, really small. It's about 1 by 1,000, 1,000 times thinner than our hair.
Whoa. Keep up, you guys.
So my nanoscaffolds, they're called nano because they have features in the nanoscale. They have really, really tiny features. And these are the features of the scaffold that I have. Now, they're about 100 nanometers, And what's special about them is this is the size what our brain has. This is the size of the physical features in the brain. So our brain has physical features in 100 nanometer. I'm recreating it artificially on a scaffold, right? So I'm mimicking the physical structure of the brain onto a scaffold. So once I make this scaffold, I then grow the brain cells on top of it. Once I grow brain cells, I see, can I guide the brain cells to form circuits as they were forming in the brain? If yes, then I can potentially develop the technology to help them to help them form the circuits after they have been damaged. So this is an image to show you that I'm able to guide neural circuits on my scaffold. So you saw the neuron in the first image, which had wires coming out of it. Now in this image, you can see that the wires coming out of the neurons are actually getting guided. So these guys coming out of my neuron, out of the neuron from the brain cell, is getting guided on the scaffold. And to give you a close-up, this image also shows you that the neuron is getting guided. The circuits are getting guided. This is one single neuron. Now, what happens if I put more neurons on top of my scaffold? Because as I said, the brain has not one, but billions of them. I don't have billions, but I have a few hundreds. What happens when I put a few hundred neurons? This is what happens. They start guiding themselves to form organized circuits and organized networks. And you see these straight lines coming up. This is clearly following the scaffold geometry. They're following the nanoscale scaffolds as per the features that they had. So I'm able to guide the neurons to form circuits as I want. So the next step is to take the true knowledge from neuroscience and then mimic the circuits to form as they form in the brain itself. Where do we go from here? So as I was telling you earlier, we want to use these nanoscaffolds to help the neurons form circuits after the brain has been damaged. So that is where we want to go. And imagine that the brain has a damage due to a disease or an injury. The circuits get damaged. But when we put your nanoscaffold, so when you put your nanoscaffold in, the brain after the injury, the brain has damage, the circuits are disrupted. Then you put your nanoscaffolds in, and what you have is basically the repairing of that part of the brain. So the future from here is to use nanotechnology to rewire the brain and treat the damage. With this, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Wow.